You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3 from New Orleans.
Sorry about that, Queeve. And we're off to a good start here on Fika. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Our guest today is C.K McDonnell. Queeve is the author of the Stranger Times series, the Dublin Trilogy, and the McGarry Stateside series. Once a stand-up and comedian and television writer, he has given that up to concentrate on writing books, and we're all benefiting from that concentration. Some time ago, I saw an author's note on social media that gave me a hearty chuckle. And of course, I had to see who the author was. It was Mr. McDonnell. And so I immediately purchased his work, The Man with One of Those Faces, and continued to chuckle. But unfortunately, there's a lot of reading that happens here on Fika, and I know the only way I get to concentrate on one author is to invite them. And so I did. And what I discovered by reading more of Queeve's work is that his humor is victimless. You're not laughing at someone. You're laughing at the uniqueness of humanity as a whole and your role in it. You're laughing at all those things we think are important and really aren't, like how to spell recognize. And perhaps if we all took a minute to explain our reasons for doing things with a side of humor, we could have a lot of the world laughing together, like Queeve did with his author's note and he does with his books. There's wisdom in that, magic even. And though Reggie of the Stranger Times counsels that you shouldn't question magic, my curiosity is having me do just that. So thank you for the wisdom, the laughter, and the magic, Queeve, and welcome to Fika.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. It's lovely to be here. Yes, very excited.
And I just want to say hello back to Tamara. Thanks for watching us today. So before we get started, I'm going to start with Stranger Times. And could you tell the audience a little bit about it in case they haven't read it, which I can't imagine. No, in case they haven't read it and they can keep up.
Cool. Well, basically, The Stranger Times is a newspaper set in Manchester, which is in the north of England, which is where I live, despite obviously not being from there. And it's basically the easiest touchstone for Americans is, if you remember the Weekly World News, which is sadly gone, it was the paper that reported ridiculous news from around the world. There's the Fortean Times as well. And that's the whole idea, is basically it's a newspaper that reports weird news from around the world, all kinds of wacky stuff. And then they find out that some of it isn't quite as crazy as they thought. And it turns out that under the world that we know, there is magic and there are all these weird and wonderful things happening in the background, as it were.
And I'm going to get right down to my question. The one I want to know, everyone, because it's my show. Okay, well, reading this, I thought of something that I had never thought of before. The timing of humor in books. Okay, so as a stand-up comedian, you would have built the story and then just sent in the zinger. But I never thought of doing that with books before until I got to a point where I'm fond of all the characters, but I have a Bancroft thing happening. So he simply said, what was it? I've gone off talking, and now he simply said, I wish to withdraw my previous remark. And I started laughing so hard, I almost had to smother myself with my pillows because I didn't want to wake my husband up over this one line. But it was because you had created such a strong character with him that we knew that might be just a little off for him. So how do you, this is a big question, but how do you keep track of the plot, do all of the things that you normally do, but build to a scene like that?
Well, with comedy and stuff, to be honest, I have I'm sitting in my writing office right now, and just to my right here, there is a pin board which is full of scenes in all different colors, depending on the point of view of the character, to distinguish who's who we're following at that point. So how I build a story is I sort of build a story out like that. But one of the things I always feel like I give a very unsatisfactory answer. People ask about how you write humor, because honestly, it's how I think. It's how my brain works. Like, if you give authors, tell them you have to get from A to B, which is essentially what all these cards are, there's not a joke on this board. What is this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. But then to get from A to B, comedy is just how my brain gets there. It doesn't take the normal route, because I was a stand-up for 20 years. And before that, I wrote TV at the same time. And before that, I was a weird kid. So I've had, a long time to build up these. Frankly, it's like having the muscles that, it's like if you ask a footballer to explain how they pass a ball, they can go through all the technique and stuff and you can alter it. But ultimately, 90% of it is pure instinct. And it kind of ends up being, you can learn how to get better, but you can't really explain to somebody how you got better. So there is a lot of timing in these things. But the weird thing is, when people talk about lines and like funny lines in the books, and that's a good example, that line on itself makes there's nothing funny about that line inherently. But what makes it funny is when the characters are talking, when you build up their personalities, then it becomes funny. We actually did a thing years ago with my Bunny McGarry books, which we'll come on to. But the point is, we asked all the fans of it to write in and tell us their favorite lines. And what we found from that was there really wasn't a quotable, like a line that they all fell on, because they're always we got so many responses back. People going, I keep trying to think of one, and I just think that there's all these things, but the line itself isn't funny. And it's because you build up, and in the same way is because I don't think you're actually writing jokes in not to get too technical, but you don't really put jokes or zingers into a book. They are funny lines in context, and same as they are in kind of really in scripts. Because like a real sort of one-liner gag there's a very high, strong chance that will look like you're shoehorning something in. So it's the same way that the person that's made you laugh most in your life very probably will be your partner or your best friend, regardless of what stand-up comedians you're a fan of and authors and all that. Because in the context of knowing people, stuff becomes funny. So there'll be like, between you and your partner, there'll be something that'll be hilarious that makes no sense to anybody else. Like one example between myself and my wife is "those ducks are back" is a line that we say to each other that I won't tell you the context, but nobody else would understand what on earth we're talking about. But we both crack up on the line "those ducks are back."
And so it's know your characters, and
basically humor.
And know the background of their story and their relationship. And so it's all a million puzzle pieces that you put together on that board.
And they come together that sort of way. Like when I'm writing dialogue, you just kind of put people in a room and get them talking. Like I don't really plan out what a character is like beforehand, really. What I actually do is you put them in a room with somebody else, you get them bouncing off each other. You get ideally a bit of conflict or, something they're working towards, or they're going in two different ways. And that's how you find out who they are. In fact, a lot of it is they sort of end up talking about something like this interview would be a classic example. We're supposed to be talking about one thing. We're going to end up talking about lots of different things because that's how humans talk. We don't really have, this is a piece of information. This is my response to that piece of information. This is, we don't do it like robots. We go off on wild tangents. We repeat ourselves. We do all these things. Now, you don't want people repeating themselves in books, but you do want them going off on tangents because that makes them real people. And if you don't do that, then they're just going to end up being two-dimensional.
And yeah, I think that's another grabber out of your books is that, well, I'm a dialogue character kind of person. That motivates my reading. So those characters were so real. I mean, you could see them being next to you in a room and talking. And so yeah, that's completely understandable. It's putting the pieces together. And you must have a very big head to have all of this going on inside.
I do. In very real terms, I actually have a massive head, by which I mean baseball hats don't fit me. Like I've always, ever since as a child, I generally have a baseball cap here now, and it's one of the ones I have to send away for because my head is ridiculous. God help my poor mother. My head is a ridiculous melon size. So, yes. So, I mean, as of I always get asked about remembrance. To be honest, I've had people send me emails, if I'm completely honest. Probably shouldn't admit this. And I had somebody go, like, referred to a line in one of the Stranger Times books, going, "Oh, it's a very clever nod towards Sir Terry Pratchett there." Now, one, Sir Terry Pratchett's my all-time favorite author. Two, I have no idea what that person was talking about, because it was like, is there a clever? I genuinely didn't know. Maybe there was at the time, but I have such a bad memory that I genuinely, I actually end up having to reread my books before I write the next one in the series. And it's alarming how fresh it is for me when I do so, because my brain has forgotten so much of the story. And then you go, "Oh yeah, this happened. Oh, that's exciting." So yeah, I don't have some sort of great memory for these things. I have to sort of, God love her, my wife is my first reader / main editor before it goes to the other editors. And it's her job to basically remind me of things that I've written.
So I'm going to just take a hold. There's several questions here or comments. So Susan, yeah, I think we covered. So he doesn't intentionally develop the characters. They do develop as you write, right?
Yeah, I mean, you do some work. Like, I remember thinking through certain things about them, but I don't sort of sit down. Like some authors, I think, sit down and do like a 2-page questionnaire of who this person is. And I don't think if I filled out a questionnaire, I don't think it would tell you much about me. I don't really think that works. I think people are more in the margins than in those sort of weird little facts.
They don't fit in the little boxes.
Exactly. The tick in the thing, every time I do one of those boxes, even for any kind of form, it always feels a bit odd. Where even when they've actually put Caucasian Irish, by the way, as a thing you can now get in the UK, which is weird that I'm supposed to be somehow different to someone who was born 50 miles away in Wales. It doesn't seem like much difference to me, but yeah.
I know, because you're, and then we have a country like Canada where people are so far apart and so different because of different climates and things. So
yeah, I mean, you literally have different climates and stuff, which is amazing. I mean, Ireland and Canada and even America for that matter. This, I mean, like literally, as a friend of mine is Australian, and by the way, this is a weird thing. Have you ever seen? This is a complete segue. Have you ever seen a real map of the world, Vicky? Because you know the map we all like, the globe and stuff, where America's over there and Britain's got this. But the real map of the world, anyone, if you haven't seen this, Google the phrase "real map of the world." It will blow your mind, because the way they made the globe, basically, Africa is way bigger than it's ever represented on maps. And similarly, Australia is enormous, whereas on most maps, you see it as a tiny little thing down the bottom.
Right.
But a friend of mine, so yeah, it's just a weird thing, but a friend of mine had always had a hilarious joke about Britain, an Australian comic called Steve Hughes, and he always talked about Britain. He said, "It's a nice place, but I've got friends who could mow this." And his point was basically that's the difference in size. So yeah, I mean, and that's kind of why I like writing stuff in America, because it is such a big, immense place that anything can happen in America, as we all know.
And probably has.
95% chance it's happened in Florida.
Okay. If we go to Florida, we're going to be totally off topic.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I'm not going to kid you. I actually have done an hour's podcast just on my love of Florida and my Florida man stories.
We have another author from Florida who writes mysteries and are rather humorous, and she has mentioned Florida Man in her.
Oh yeah, I mean Carl Hyacin, and there's other authors as well. Carl Hyacin is one of my favorites, and he basically his entire career was just explaining Florida to people, and it doesn't disappoint. Even in the Stranger Times world, when it like all the a big part of the Stranger Times world is that the newspaper articles, I actually put in like fake newspaper articles that are supposed to have been in the newspaper, the Stranger Times, that they're littered throughout all of the books. And those are quite hard to write, by the way, because you have to come up with something that's weirder than what's actually happened in the world.
I was going to ask you about those, because they're a fun part of it. I was thinking, the world has gotten very strange.
Yes. I mean, it's weird because I think the world was always weird, but it genuinely does feel like it has kicked it up a notch. I think particularly, I remember saying the line in 20, because like the first Stranger Times book came out in January 2020, which was my debut as a traditional author. And if you can get your first book to come out in the middle of a lockdown when no bookshops are open anywhere in the world except Australia, bizarrely, that is ideal. Do go for that. That's definitely what you want from your first book coming out. But I remember being interviewed about it, and it was talking about strange times. Bear in mind, we're all in sort of like, we were heading towards 2021. Yeah, we're in lockdown and stuff at the time. And I remember someone saying about literally going, this is supposed to be about like a weird version of the world. And does it feel like that the world's kind of caught up with it? It's like, yeah, it's dangerously close to being factual at this point. That's how weird the world was getting at that point.
Yeah, satire is kind of difficult to do now.
Yeah. Basically, humanity has jumped the shark, to use a phrase, where it's like nothing really makes sense anymore. It's like literally every time someone sends me a note, you occasionally get someone going, well, that seems a bit unbelievable. My editor sent me something about one of my books, went, that seems a bit unbelievable. And I sent him back a story from news going, that's basically what happened here. So
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. So Tamara, so you build the situation and personalize personalities and situations, and that's what you explained earlier. Okay, so we'll put this up. Susan, you just answered my question, putting them in a room so they communicated and developed. Okay, I had to put that up because the eyes are getting old. Okay, thanks for watching, right. Susan. And we're going to show this because I was talking about a friend when we were in the green room earlier. And this is the friend that loves your books and is looking forward to the next bunny.
Oh, thank you very much.
So that is...
It's always nice to have a large yellow rubber duck as a fan. But that'll make no sense for anyone on the radio. Sorry, the picture was a large yellow rubber duck. That's
right. It becomes difficult. Yes, we have to explain all of the pictures. Yeah. So when we're talking about, so you're there and you're writing, and it takes hours and hours and years sometimes to write a book. And so
usually in between those two, usually somewhere between a year and an hour. There's a happy medium.
Well, it depends on if you're AI or if you're, some people take 5 years. I don't know. Yeah, actually, I meant to say months and years, and the hours slipped out, and I was just trying to cover it, Queeve, but thank you for pointing that out. You overcompensated, sorry. So I was sitting there trying to work that away. And so you have these jokes, and are you the kind of person that reads aloud your work to Elaine, friends, family, or do you keep it in?
No. I don't read it to somebody. I mean, my wife's idea of hell, I'm guessing, is me sitting there reading stuff at her. I mean, occasionally when we're arguing, because she is like we have like a developmental editor and a line editor, not to go into the weeds, but Elaine is kind of in charge of everything, frankly. And occasionally we'll have a discussion about something making sense or not. And I will occasionally, I'm in my office, and she works because she runs our business. So she's down in the house with the 2 dogs. And I will occasionally read stuff over the phone to try and win an argument. And then she will go, no, it still doesn't make sense. But I do occasionally read stuff out to myself, or indeed to the dog, because just to see how it sounds, and to make sure the rhythm of it is right, and that sort of logically it's a bit, because language changes. It changes when you hear it read aloud. And like, I'm sure we have people who listen to audiobooks, and we're very lucky where my books, we have 2 exceptional narrators, really genuinely seriously good. So many people have literally read everything I've ever written, but not actually ever physically held a book, because they've just gone through the audiobooks. But the great thing with those is, apparently the way I write, it suits those narrators. And there's a lovely chemistry then that happens where you're collaborating effectively with somebody else. And it being, and like the feedback I've always had is like, it reads well. They like reading it because it's the way I write is kind of that way. And I guess that must come from, at least part of it must come from, screenwriting, and also my stand-up background, where I'm used to speaking aloud to people. So, because there's nothing worse than stuff that, like, bad dialogue, and I'm sure you've seen examples, but there's nothing worse than you read a piece of dialogue and just go, nobody talks like that. Like, really, that's just that one of those exchanges in any book can completely pull me out of it. I've stopped reading a book where I've read a page and went, nobody would ever say that in real life. So you always have to make sure that you're writing from a real place with people. Otherwise, it comes across terribly.
No, it's important. the dialogue is very important to the believability, which and every character has to sound like themselves. It is just goes around in the puzzles. You have to build the character, then do you have to build the dialogue, then the dialogue goes back, and so do you see? I don't think you would, but do you find it very different writing a novel from like a screenplay?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly different. I mean, I kind of wanted to write a novel years ago. This is how I started off, because my first book, A Man with Those Faces, came out 7 years ago, actually, last week. Yeah, it was because it came out on my birthday. I had no idea, frankly, how to write a book, and I'd written a lot of screenplays. Particularly, I had sitcom scripts optioned. I had, over the years, I may have had 10, something like that, screenplay or sitcoms optioned, which are, for any, explain that if anyone doesn't know, it's TV option stuff, and then you write a script and they pay you for a script, and then they're pitching it to broadcasters and stuff. So I went through that for years, and people sort of liked it, but nothing ever got made. And that's what I much prefer writing a novel, by the way, because in this day and age, you can put it out. Whereas TV scripts, you write it and literally 3 people might get to read it, even if it's good. Because especially in Britain, it's changed a bit now with the Netflix and all that. There's more variety of broadcasters.
But Pet Squad did get made, and you were
nominated
for a BAFTA for that, right?
Yeah, I got nominated for a BAFTA, and apparently nearly won, which we found out afterwards. We were against a thing called Cannonball. That was a weird story where the BAFTAs were, because it was the children's BAFTAs, right? And I'd never been nominated for a big award before. So I thought I need to get a tuxedo. I turned up to a swanky hotel in London, and it turned out it was not a black tie affair, as I had assumed it would be. But not only that, the only people wearing tuxedos were the staff. So I ended up inadvertently turning up to an award ceremony dressed as a waiter. So I ended up I was a nominee, and now people ask me if I could get a drink, and I'm like, oh, there's a bar over there, and I was like, oh man, this is so bad. I nearly turned around when I got to it. I literally got out of the car and went, oh my god. So yeah, I did the cartoon series and stuff like that, and it's been a while since I've written kids TV. God, it's probably about a decade now. But I will say this, it was an incredible learning experience, because it's hard to get a chance to write TV. It's hard to break in. There's a different system in America, but it's equally hard to break into in its own way. In Britain, it's very hard to get into because they don't have rooms of writers a lot of the time on stuff over here like they have in America. So you kind of have to get a script commissioned, which is a big thing, especially if you're just a writer and not also a performer in it. So kids TV was great, because kids TV, I got to write, I must have written nearly 80 or 90 episodes of different programs, including Pet Squad and other stuff I wrote. And I got to write, and then they were edited, and then they were filmed, and I went through the whole process. And while it's a different medium, you learn, particularly writing a cartoon series, which is 11 and a half minutes long, what you learn from that is absolute brevity. You cannot mess around. It's 11 and a half minutes. You have to tell a story, get the jokes in, make sure the characters make sense, all of that in a short period of time. So that's a very challenging thing. And honestly, that's probably the best thing that ever happened to me as a writer. Was I never wanted to write kids TV. I got into it by accident, but writing something like that, because it sharpens you up in a way that nothing else ever will as a writer.
And so you had a lot of experience with the cut, chop, and just put what is the most important in there.
Yeah, just get to the point. You just learn as you go that you have to, and then you got Ed. And I was very lucky. I worked with a brilliant TV production company called Darren McQueen over here, who are literally the best in Britain. They won awards for it, and they really deserve it. To the point where I had the problem where I actually got in with them by accident, where they read my script and liked it, and I said, "Look, I haven't written kids TV," and they said, They actually said, "We don't want kids TV writers. We want people who are just writing comedy to come in and do kids TV, because you want a fresher feel than we think we're getting in kids TV." And they ended up really liking my stuff. I had a very good relationship with them, but they were brilliant. They were so on point. They had a brilliant producer who was great. It went through the script. I then went to work for other companies, and they weren't as good and they weren't as organized. And when you get used to an absolutely superb, working thing, that you don't realize that's not the standard. But literally, I had the problem where they were so great, everyone else wasn't anywhere near as good at them. And I was like, oh, this is not enjoyable at all because I've written a thing and you're not giving me proper feedback and everything. So I think that's the thing. If you work with great people, they make you so much better.
Right, because they give you that feedback and it encourages you to go on. You can fix it.
Exactly. And like a great editor can do that for you as well, where they'll push you on and they'll make you better. Because you need someone to tell you what you do well, and you need someone to tell you what you do badly. Like the greatest piece of feedback is a guy called Scott Pack, who's still the editor on our Bunny books now. He's the developmental editor, which for anyone listening is they handle the story. They go through and tell you this scene is wrong, whereas like a line editor goes through individual sentences, basically. But on my very first book, A Man at One of Those Faces, which was the first one you read, we literally hired him, and we didn't know him. We just hired him on a website, and we managed to get into it. We didn't realize his CV was as impressive as I now know it is. But he read through the book, and like he gave loads of great feedback. But near the end of the book, the best feedback I ever got, and this pertains to writing humor in particular, was he went, "You see this joke here, and this line here, and this line here, and this line here." He said they're all very funny, great lines. But he said you need to take them all out because this is in the finale. And we're now in a situation where you've made us care about these three characters, which are the main three characters in the first book. We care about them. They're in really serious danger. We need to find out what happens. We don't want you to be making jokes now. We want you to tell us what's happening. And that was the thing, because I think we all have the stuff. I think most people, when they're writers, probably know what they do well and know what they do badly, or, and like, obviously I knew like I had a good head for the good line and the funny line, I guess, from my background. So I was, to use a golf analogy, that was the club in my bag I trusted the most. So I was using it a lot. But the thing is, you have to stretch yourself and not do that. And he quite rightly said, take those out and, have confidence in the story and have confidence that we're here because we care about the characters. Because there's things like, one of the things I don't do great, for example, as a writer, it's not even so much that, but if anyone reads my books, when it comes to describing what somebody's wearing or describing a building, architecture and clothing, those kind of things, I really don't spend much time on them. And whereas there's some great authors, Ben Aranovich is one I always cite for architecture stuff. He writes the Rivers of London books, and he spends a couple of pages talking through the architecture of a building. And it works in his book because he has a real passion for it, and he has this wonderful ability to bring that alive for you. Whereas if someone asked me to describe a building, I can tell you what color it is. And frankly, with clothing and stuff, as my wife did this once to just sort of illustrate this to me, when I said I've never really described clothing, and I was like, maybe I should put more effort into putting them in. And she went, "You were in the pub last night with like Paul, John, Alan. Yeah. Can you tell me what any of them are wearing?" I was like, "No." Exactly. It's because you don't care about that. You pay I generally don't have an interest in that. And, it's just not something I pay attention to. And I think rather than trying to force, like, obviously spend a bit of time with it and make sure when you need to, you can do it. But rather than trying to force something like that into like, I've seen people write stuff, especially newer writers, where you feel like they're giving you description because they feel like they have to give a description. And what comes across is you're just being dumped information that they feel they're obliged to give that doesn't really add anything. And my point is, you need to do enough information that people always know what's happening, but you don't need to feel like you have to write like other people do. It's part of finding your own voice, finding what you do and don't talk about, and kind of leaning into that as much as possible.
And I think it's important for readers, too, to find the authors that suit them. For example, you say you're not good at describing things, but you give enough. Like, I can sit here and see this church that the Stranger Times is in. Like, I love it. And I don't, it has enough of that stained glass window and the dust, and you can picture it, right? But it's not...
Yeah. Which is based on loosely based on a church that actually is in Manchester. I literally passed it on the way to when I was genuinely. The story of the Stranger Times is I had, like, the Bunny books had taken off and we're doing well, and I had an agent and stuff, and there was all this kind of interest, and they were like, "Oh, well, what do you want to write next?" And I literally tried to write a serious quote unquote crime book. And I remember having my board at the time, I had like 7 or 8 different serious books I was thinking of writing. And I woke up one morning and I remembered a sitcom script I'd written probably about 10 years before that, where set in a newspaper that was reporting weird news, because that's an obsession of mine. I've the 14 Times and all that stuff. I've always been obsessed with weird news stuff. And I can remember literally standing in the shower thinking, God, yeah, I really like that. I remember, it was this TV script at the time. My aides at the time just didn't even get it. I don't think she ever sent it to anybody. Just literally, she looked at it and didn't really do anything with it. But I remember thinking, I loved the idea. And I actually remembered, can't find the script, by the way, but I remembered what happened in the script. And a lot of things that happened in the first few chapters of the Stranger Times book as it became ended up being from that script. But I sort of had that idea and I thought, well, it was in the sitcom, they were just reporting weird news and it was just the kind of, but there was nothing really behind it. Whereas in a novel, you think, well, we need something to happen. And then the thing hit me was like, well, some of the stuff would be real. There really would be magic in the world. And I was thinking about that, getting excited. I literally got out of my apartment. I was walking to my writing office. And I was thinking, oh my God, this needs to be in Manchester. Because that's the city, I now live in the outskirts. But at the time I was living in the city centre of it. And I was like, this is perfect for here. It makes perfect sense for here. And I literally passed the church that the office is based on the way. And I was going, oh my God, that's the office. And by the end of this 20-minute walk, I was running up the stairs in my old office, trying to get to a pad and pen because everything was in my head. And I needed to make sure I got everything down on paper because it all just sort of came together really fast. But that's something where it started off 10 years beforehand. And then it came together in like half an hour that morning, which is just how the brain works.
Have you learned to keep a pad of paper and a pen beside the bed now?
No,
are you still writing?
I don't, bizarrely, because I used to try to use my phone, but the problem with that is if you put notes into your phone, you've then got your phone in your hand, which we all know is how you lose 4 hours, and next thing you know, it's 4 a.m. and you're trying to get to sleep. So what I actually do now, and I feel less bad about this now that my wife, for the last 3 years, I think, is full-time running our publishing company, so it's more of her job. Whereas before, I genuinely like wake up my wife Elaine and like punch in the shoulder and go, "Can you send me a text and say this?" So she'll send me a text with like whatever 5 random words, and all right, yeah. She sends me a text, and then in the morning I look at the text and go, "Oh yeah, that was that." I mean, that's assuming I can remember what it was. But yeah, that's how I take notes. I wake up my long-suffering wife and make her send them to me.
I was just going to say, we all need to thank Elaine, all right? For a lot of things, apparently.
Oh, for everything. I mean, it's like literally, I think a friend of mine summed it up when it was like 2 of them having a conversation and they were talking about our wedding, and there was like somebody who's getting married and said, what was the theme of Caimh's wedding? And I think my mate, without missing a beat, went, I think it was, how the hell has he pulled this off? Because it's like we're all kind of go. I remember my then live aide at the time being quite drunk, a lovely man, but he was like literally cornered me and he went, I know everybody is saying that she's too good for you, but I think you're all right. Like that was, well, thank you very much to the man who's professionally paid to sell me to other people. But yes, I'm a very lucky boy, as has been universally acknowledged by everyone I have ever met.
And we have acknowledged it here, so our work is done.
Good. Yeah, we need to pretty much do that every time I'm on any podcast. Yeah, it's a rule.
So there are 3 Stranger Times out there now, and you have another one coming in.
Another one coming in January, which is, it's just literally, I'm doing the very, very last read through, the proof read through at the weekend, and then it's officially out there. Well, not out there, but it's all done, and I'm very excited about that one because I think we're all, because it just worked out that it's a weird thing. I know, sorry, you probably were leading up to a question, and I'm sure I'll get back to it in a second.
Oh no, I told you, go wherever you want to go, Caimh.
Oh, okay. This has never, to this extent, has never happened before, but occasionally, because I don't like all this plotter and pantser thing. I know you authors have always talked about, do they plot it out beforehand or they do it by the seat of their pants? And I kind of am a mixture where I'll have parts of it, I'll have bits of the jigsaw puzzle, but I won't have all of it. And I usually sort of, what happens is I write to a certain point, as long as my brain's kind of running ahead of where I am. So I'm never like sitting here going, I don't know what I'm writing tomorrow. I'm always like, I know what I'm writing for the next couple of days, and I can kind of plan the next sort of week. But 2/3 of the way through Relight My Fire, something came up because I had to fix a problem I'd basically given myself. Without giving too much away, there's zombies in it and stuff. But I had to come up with a reason about how these people how a certain person would still be able to be brought back from the dead and stuff. And I came up with something that ended up making it so much better. And all of a sudden, I won't say more than this, but put it this way. It's a friend of mine, Gary, who's actually thanked in the book. He's referred to as Zombie Gary. he's obsessed with zombies to the point where he has the zombie room in his house because his wife does not like zombie stuff. Gary has a lot of it. So Gary has a large room in his house, which is quote unquote the zombie room, full of all of his stuff. And he was like my zombie consultant throughout this book. And he's the best compliment I've ever got off him. And he's a fellow stand-up comedian, but he went, do you know what? Weirdly, you've come up with a take on zombies I have never seen before. To the point where we have a standing bet of £5 where he says, I reckon within 3 to 4 years, someone's going to rip this idea off and it'll end up in being on a TV show or a film with zombies because it's too good of an idea of how zombies come about. Now, maybe that will happen, maybe it won't. But point is, I'm really happy, and it ended up making the rest. It just really took flight in it. Like when I'm writing stuff, I don't like. You sit there laughing to yourself, and you go, "No, I don't. I'm just writing." When I was writing this book for the first time ever, I genuinely was laughing to myself at a couple of points because it just sort of came together. It was almost like I didn't feel like I'd been responsible for it. It's almost like some cosmic thing had sort of come in and just, you almost felt guilty when something comes that easily. But it was like, I ended up writing the last third of it incredibly fast because I was having such a good time. So hopefully that comes across. And so far the feedback's been great from editors and stuff, but hopefully that comes across when people get to finally read it.
Well, I think the whole series would make a great television program, a great series that I've only read the once, but I can see I'm a monster of the week with a background mythology kind of girl. Okay. I've always been, cool. And so this is the first time I wanted to ask you, because I have just read the first one. Is this a monster of the book with a background mythology kind of thing happening? Is that what?
There's an element of that a little bit in the sense that you always want to introduce something new in every book. So it kind of is that way. But the other thing with The Stranger Times is because it follows a team of, I think, eight journalists or people around the newspaper. They are a kind of found family, which is always, my books always end up being basically found families of groups of people. Mm-hmm. I tried to, at one point, the McGarry Stateside series, which is all about taking my main character, Bunny McGarry, and him going to America. And that literally started off as I was going to do and this is very different, but my version of like Jack Reacher almost, except it'd be very different because of my tone of voice and stuff. But interestingly, the very first thing that happened in the very first book, Disaster Inc., which is where the author's note comes from, I immediately found him a couple of friends, and they end up being a team. Because whatever in my writing, the one thing I've noticed is I become obsessed with building little families of people for whatever reason. So The Stranger Times is really like that. But the thing with that is, so while it isn't, there's different monsters maybe sort of in the books, but because there's so much plot, like there's things happening.
Yeah, no, there's things that have...
But they build on each other. Like the second book, you can kind of read the second book without reading the first book. You definitely can't read the third book without reading the first two, I would suggest. By publishers will hate me saying that. But the fourth book, you probably could read without reading the earlier ones. But there is a world that builds up, and there is progressively... Because, I mean, God bless people who can write standalone books. I just keep moving people forward and changing their... Because again, like, and almost that's the genius genuinely of Jack Reacher, is they found a way of writing a book where you can pick up anyone in the series and read it, and it's, you will understand what's happening. That's actually genuinely really hard to do well. Lots of people do it badly, but the genius of Lee Child is he does that really well.
Okay, so because we have to get to the Bunny McGarry series, and I was just thinking about your tree and the thing, I just want to mention that you are having a spectacular event on October 30th on Facebook Live.
Yeah, we're doing a Facebook Live and like YouTube, where basically the Stranger Times, a big part of the Stranger Times thing, which kind of happened by accident, but we've now been nominated for a British Fantasy Award, is I do a podcast where I've written short stories in the Stranger Times world. And then, so I do them. And there's been like 3 series. Every time there's a book coming out, I do a series. So there's quite a few of them up there now, which I'm really proud of. They're all read by stand-up comedians or mates of mine, which has been brilliant because these are people who've listened to audiobooks for years but never got asked to do one. And some of the performances have been outstanding. So they're really, 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 really pleased with them. And but yes, I do that, and then I write short stories for the Stranger Times world. So I think on October 30th, what's going to happen is we'll have some stuff about announcement about the new book. We'll also have me reading a short story, me or Brendan, our brilliant narrator. I haven't decided yet. And it'll just generally be some messing around. And it'll be 8 o'clock UK time, which would be 3 p.m. American.
There's 5
3
hours.
p.m. New York time. And then that's 8 hours.
Well, there's lots of, the CST is like an hour.
Yeah, I'll leave it to you because I'm going to offend people by getting their time wrong. People get really upset when you get their time wrong. I've noticed that.
I'm not sure that's a thing, Queeve. I'm not sure.
Oh, no, they do. They do get upset with me. I mean, bear in mind how people get my name wrong all the time, and like I'm cool with it. People get very angry if you get their time zone wrong. Oh, live it.
So we're going on because we still have to get through many more books with the Dublin Trilogy, which isn't really a trilogy, but you stuck to it being a trilogy. You're still calling it. So if you go to Queeve's website, which you can see spinning along below us, or just go in your search engine and search for him, you'll find it. Yeah,
you probably can't spell Queeve, but look, the Dublin Trilogy and the whitehairedirishman.com is all one word.
Well, you spelt it underneath you there. They can see it, your name's showing.
Oh, cool.
How you spell it on the books, and then just
if they're listening on the radio, that's I'm worried about everyone, Vicky. We can't leave people out. Audio people are important too, Vicky.
You don't. Well, I was gonna say, but you didn't put your last name, so like you have a Madonna thing going on there.
Well, I would say about my last name, but to be fair, as every time I spell Queeve or something, they go, "What's your second name?" Have you had many of us? It's just me. There actually genuinely is, because it's a nickname-ified version of Queeveen, which is the original of Kevin. Weirdly, this is true. It was only me, and then we seem to have people have started calling their kids it because it sort of got out into the zeitgeist. And not because they're fans of me and stuff, but I guess they were looking for an Irish name, and some people sort of said it to them. And like I've seen it being quoted in the Guardian newspaper as an Irish name, and you're like going, "It was only me." It wasn't like it's a proper. But now it seems to have entered the zeitgeist, which is wonderfully weird.
The things you have gotten started. Okay.
Yeah, I mean...
you're just sitting there in your office, reading to the dog.
Yeah.
This is going on. So, I know where we are. Okay, you haven't thrown me off. Good. If you go to his website... if you go to his website, you will go to reading what order to read the books in. I think it's book order. And there you will see, because you can't leave anybody else. See, this is the point. This is why I love his books and I love this thing. Queeve has made a list for people who like to read chronologically, people who like to read in the order that the books have happened in. So your prequels will be first. He has made a list to accommodate everyone. And then finally, there is a huge graph that is like a family of books, because he likes to make families, a family tree that has all the different books on there. Mm-hmm. So my question is, are you planning on adding books to this tree?
Oh, inevitably. Because to explain what happened is, I literally never, if you're an author, put a number into a series title. Cannot emphasize that enough as a tip. I mean, it's not the most glamorous, like artistic one, but oh my God. Because literally I had an idea for, I think, 3 books, and then I realized the third book actually, because it was going to have 2 timelines, and I realized there was too much going on in it. So I ended up writing a prequel, and then the fourth book after that, which was the sort of kind of companion piece to the prequel. So then we had 4 books in a trilogy. And then I literally, like a couple of years later, we split off to McGarry Stateside. So it was a different series. We're Bunny going to America, kind of leading off the Dublin Trilogy. Then I had an idea for like a sequel to the prequel, which is where things went horribly wrong. So literally there's a 16-year gap between the sequel and the other 3 books rather. So I started writing. I wrote literally a sequel that happens like a month later, I think, to the prequel, and then that we had to put that somewhere, so that had to be part of the Dublin Trilogy as well. And to be honest, now we've reached book 7 of the Dublin Trilogy. It's okay now, because when you had 4 and 5 books, people kept sending us emails. Now people have realized that it's whatever is happening deliberately, because the amount of people got angry about, do you know what a trilogy is? And we're like, yeah, we do. So we now have to call it the increasingly inaccurately titled Dublin Trilogy. That's now the full name.
And once again, you can't fill out those forms, and you cannot box yourself into a number of books. You should have known this.
Yeah, no, it was a terrible, terrible mistake. And to be fair, again, I mean, we've given her a lot of praise, but my wife should have slapped me around the head and gone, "This is a terrible idea. Don't do that." And she let me go on that one, and that's where it all went wrong. And like since then, I've literally had, the McGarry Stateside series. I've also had a spin-off book of that featuring 2 side characters. I've span off the Dublin Trilogy in another way where it's everyone else except Bunny from the Dublin books, because people were sort of going, "Oh, I'm missing the rest of them. I don't know what's happening with the rest of them." And I was like, "Oh, I'm missing them too." So I ended up writing them. So it ends up being, I mean, that's the one thing, because we do it ourselves and independently published and it's gone well and stuff. But like, no publisher would have ever let me write books in the way I have done it. They would have said, "No, write another book with just that character and we'll follow that character." And because people like things where I'm like, I'm going to write whatever I want effectively. It's kind of been what I've always done. And because it's a story I want to tell, and hopefully people will enjoy it and kind of come along for the ride. And we're very lucky that people have.
Well, they don't understand all that's happening in your head. Like, it's not like they can see all these characters in the stories they're telling each other, and and they know, because people are obviously going to get attracted to different characters there.
Like, and there's people who like different, like some people like the McGarry Stateside best, some people like the Dublin, or MCM Investigations, which is the spin-off. And it's weird, and you sort of get, every time we announce one of the other books, we get an email from people going, "I like those books, but I prefer the other books." And you're like going, "Well, okay, but I'm going to write whatever I'm going to write." So, one of them will come eventually as well. Just strap in, enjoy the ride.
Caimh is out of control. No one is going to tell him what to write. But you know what? It's that passion that shows through. You need to write what you want to write. Otherwise, and I've only made it to book 3, but and that's because that's what Elaine told me to read. If we all listen to her, I think it might be a better world as well.
Oh, now, God, yeah, no doubt.
I like Bunny. I like his character because he is the perfect example of someone who portrays a certain image, but so people might criticize his behavior, but I don't think it's a spoiler to say that he does coach the kids on Sundays for
it's hurling, which is again it's an Irish sport, which you don't need to understand, by the way, because we again get a lot of emails asking us to explain it, because the whole point is you're not actually seeing them play a game, but it's all because basically he uses a youth under 12 team as an early intervention thing effectively for himself, just to get hold of kids before they get inner city Dublin, before anyone else gets hold of them. And that's the thing, he's not conventional in any way, shape or form, but his heart's in the right place, even if he is a big lummox who will propensity for violence in certain situations and stuff like that. But and he'd last 5 minutes in a real police force, because he'd be out in his ear, because you cannot do what he does. But the whole joy of what he does is he does the kind of stuff you secretly wish you could do, but you never actually would.
But the people that would criticize him for some of the things like his language or whatever, are they out on that field doing what he does every weekend?
Well, so we do get like occasionally people saying, because the Dublin books have language in them, shall we say. And people occasionally, it has to be said, Americans are interestingly more sensitive to these things than British and Irish readers are, which is interesting. Because like, weird thing is, it's literally how Irish people speak. Most Americans are fine with it, by the way. But there is, I don't want to say the words now because we're on American radio, but we use terms like God and all this sort of stuff. And we don't mean it as, like, my mother, who's very sincerely very Catholic, very religious, but she says God and this, that, and the other in conversation. And that's just how Irish people speak. We don't mean it in any disrespectful way. And my mother I remember explaining this to my mother, and she was horrified when I said, "Oh, people accuse you of blasphemy." And she was like, "Oh my God, what did you say?" And I was like, "Oh, just this." And she was like, "Well, that's how we talk. What are you talking about?" And she was like horrified that people somehow would think that was in any way disrespectful.
It is. We get a lot of, we're in the middle. We're in the middle between those sides. So those words, I watch a lot of BBC, and and it doesn't have the same criticism that it does. It's just a natural way of talking. So, I mean, you probably don't do it at grandma's house, but then grandma might. I mean, I think about Mama Brown's boys or whatever.
Mrs. Brown's boys, yeah, that's those.
Yes.
I've seen actual real Irish grandmothers turn the air blue, and it's just the way it's the way they could be very ferocious, the way they talk. But again, that's like, especially when you're writing crime. It's just like,
it's real. It's a real part of life.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just gonna take a minute because my husband, I don't want him to think that I'm ignoring him, but he's working, so he's coming in and out here. He has written for television, Hun, so I don't think he wants to go. He just want to know if you've tried to get any of the books onto television or whatever, but I don't think that's a big concern for you.
Well, they're all optioned for TV. They're all currently with production companies.
Oh, right.
They're at
Okay.
various stages of things, but there's a writer's strike, so obviously everything stopped as it should do while that's going on. But we have very good people involved on both, like Stranger Times and the Dublin books. I currently haven't tried to write any of them for scripts because, weirdly, despite the fact I was like trying to be a TV writer for years, when my own books came up, I think at the time when they initially started coming in and asking for TV things, I didn't want to try and write them because I think it's too close to me. Maybe now, next time around, if something comes up, because TV things always come and go, and I might be interested in trying to write a script for possibly the Dublin ones, but we'll see. But it's so they're all being developed. But TV is a weird beast where like loads of people's books are optioned and stuff, but actually getting them over the finish line is a big ask. So we'll see what happens.
So you heard that. I was wrong. Okay. And I've admitted it on radio once, and it's never going to happen again.
I was going to say, this has been quite the big day for your husband. That's he's got a sound drop that he's going to take out of this and use his new phone ring, I'm guessing, Vicky.
Oh, stop giving. I hope so, because he has the worst one now that drives me crazy. So for the writers out there, I want to get that out for some advice to them. You have probably some of the most experience of being in front of people, of keeping a lineup entertained, of you're out there. And, sometimes writers like to just be in their office. They don't want to go out there. Like now, I don't want to go out there. It's safe here. I have to face the people.
Yeah.
What is some advice you can give them for getting over those fears and just how to greet the people?
I think honestly, you just sort of try and embrace. Like, if anyone who turns up, they've come to hear about your books. It's a wonderful thing. Like, these are, if it's a small audience, this is kind of more of a stand-up thing. It's always one of the things I used to tell new stand-ups and stuff. If you're turn up to a gig and there's like 7 people there or something, which can easily happen, anyone's career. Those 7 people are the good guys. They turned up because they want to hear, they wanted to come to the thing. So it's your job to entertain them. It's your job. So they're on your side. So all you have to do is like never sort of go, oh, I'm, apologize for being a small crowd. Just worry about engaging them. And people love to ask questions. They love to, if you can get over the initial fear people have. It's always the same at live events. If you ask for questions, there's always that weird gap where nobody wants to ask one. Especially now, I've done quite a few author things. So and all you have to do is tell people, look, we're going to be asking questions in a minute. And then you get one person to start the ball rolling, and you just make sure you you thank them for the question, answer the question to the best of your ability. And then once you get the ball rolling, those things are easy. But you have to remember, the people in the audience are there because they like books, and that's something you have in common. And they've come to hear about your books, and you might not like public speaking and stuff, but you're going to be passionate about your work. So all you need to do is, share that passion with people. And talk to them like they're old friends you haven't seen in a while, as not complete strangers. So you're bringing them up to date. So, have them in your head about, these people, I like that I've not seen in a few years, and I'm just bringing them up to speed on what my books are about and stuff. And it just treat everything like a conversation and not like you're just talking at them.
Well, I think that's important what you brought up, because people are there is this notion out there that authors are somehow smarter and, and more everything. And I've met a lot of authors.
Then you meet me.
No, they're people. They're people. But those people that come to visit you are probably going to be a lot more uncomfortable than you are talking to you, because you are the, and so just think about making them comfortable.
Yeah, and if you can, I always like do an event with somebody else. And really, honestly, I think the other
somebody
thing as well
nice.
is,
No.
yeah. I mean, I'm like, where possible,
nice.
but if not funny, if they can't be nice, at least be funny. But I've generally done events and like having a chat with somebody else. And then the thing is, as well, frankly, like this kind of conversation, well, we're at like we're talking about the books, but you can go off on segues, because ultimately, when people are sitting there, well, they obviously want to hear about the books and stuff like that. Your biggest thing is you're not trying to tell everybody everything that happens in the books, because what you want them to do is get interested in the book and then they'll go read the book. You're not giving them a book report. So, and frankly, if they enjoy you and they enjoy you talking about books you've read, TV you've liked, all that sort of stuff, touchstones they might have, why you loved it, why you hate it, these kind of things. And then they kind of go, oh, that's, even if they don't agree with you, they go, well, I like them as a person. They're engaged. I want to see what their book is like. And then they'll read the book. You can't give people the book, verbally. You have to just get them interested. It's like throwing bait in the water and then seeing if anyone takes the bait.
Well, and you don't want to give them the whole book anyways, because you want them to buy it. Too many.
Yeah, and people don't want it room.
But don't be pushy with the sales. Just being
what you're selling is ultimately yourself. If people like you, they buy the book. You're not trying to sell them on the idea of the book, because that's a really hard thing to do. And in-person events are about the person, not the book.
Yeah, if they like you, they'll buy the book.
Yeah,
they people like nice people. So
and if you can fake that, you're fine. That's my biggest tip is just fake being a nice person for an hour, and you'll be fine. You'll sell a few books.
I don't think he's faking, but I'll ask Elaine. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but to be fair, I mean, I'll put it this way. I have been asked this in questions, and somebody said, like, if you had to choose between a dog and a person, let me just stop you there. I'm choosing the dog. I don't care what the dog's done. I don't care what who the person is. I am choosing the dog. I can remember saying that to the biggest event we had in Manchester, where somebody asked a question about something, because I always talk about my dogs, like 130 people there. It's like, oh, I'm delighted you're all here, but just to be clear, if this room had like 3 dogs in it, I'd be having a much better time, because dogs are better than people, but people are a good second.
Well, obviously, I mean, they're perfect. Dogs, they love you no matter what.
Yeah,
they listen to you read your book at them. They talk about what's on TV. So I think we should address, do you have something more planned for the McGarry Stateside series, or the Dublin?
All of the above, really. I'm the McGarry Stateside series, because I had to, basically because of lockdown, because we went to America to do research for books 2 and 3, and then 4 there was originally an idea for something that needed a lot of research and couldn't do it, and then it kind of got delayed while other books were being done. And then weirdly, when I've now written book 4, it's an entirely different book 4. I had a better idea, I enjoy more. So that book 4 is that's coming out in October. That's pretty much ready. So that we got 2 books, and I'm excited about that. That's a sort of weird kind of deliverance meets, I don't know what, but it's an exciting, a lot of action, a lot of fun. Excited to be back with that crew. And then obviously the 4th Stranger Times is out in January, and then I'm sure next year there'll be a couple of more bunny books, because the Stranger Times is 1 a year, and there'll be one of them. We signed on for 3 more books, which hasn't been announced yet, but the 4th book's coming out in January, so most people have figured that out. And then there'll be a couple more bunny books in Dublin Trilogy, because basically, as long as I have ideas, I don't ever want to get bored and feel like I have to write something in a certain thing, which is why I am a little bit higgledy-piggledy when I'm writing stuff, but it's because I'm going to go at what I'm most excited about.
Well, I was going to ask, is bouncing back between the 2 different types of series, does that stop writer's block? But I'm beginning to feel like you've never experienced writer's block.
I'm not really. No, I don't really believe in it. I think writer's block is you just haven't figured out the story. So if I get a bit of writer's block, I literally sit down, look at the board and go, okay, well, what am I writing next? So I don't really believe in it. I mean, it does, having the 2 different series and having the books in America, the book in Dublin, and it just keeps it fresh. And I've people I always think it's hilarious. People come to me when they find out you're an author and go, I have an idea for a book. And they go, let me stop you there. I have an idea for 477 books. Having an idea for a book is not that hard. It's writing the book's the tricky bit. Like literally, I can't keep up with all the ideas in my brain for, and a couple of even like serious crime books that one day I might write and stuff. But it's whatever, when I have a gap, the next thing that takes my fancy is what I'm going to write. So there will be more Bunny, there will be more Stranger Times. But, they will come when they come because I'm going to follow the muse, as it were.
And so do you have a set time that you write? Like, I'm just curious because you get a lot done.
I get a reasonable amount done. I mean, people do. So I generally, when I'm writing, I wouldn't recommend this, but the last 2 books I've written because of various things, I ended up being delayed, ended up writing every day for like 50 days solidly, which isn't a great way to do that for your health more than anything. It's a good way. I mean, the books end up good, but yeah. So I kind of come to my office, bring the dog for a walk first thing in the morning, ideally, then head up to the office, do a few hours, then me and the dog have a nap, and then come back, do a couple more hours, and then I'm done for the day. Theoretically, I should work, weekdays and have weekends off. In reality, when I get excited about writing stuff, I've ended up usually writing most days. So I'm very lucky. I've been doing it full time now since 2019, which I'm blessed. I know a lot of people don't get the chance to write full time. So I kind of get to do it when I want throughout the day and work around stuff, which is a delight.
Well, and it is a business, and I think it has to that vision of you guys have the business. It is treated as a business as opposed to I'm going to go to the cottage on my own and write this novel.
Yeah, well, I know it's Stephen King's famous thing about the muse, and the muse turns up as big angry lady at 9 o'clock in the morning who's like not this sort of airy fairy thing that I can remember seeing somebody who was in a writing course with me sharing a picture of themselves walking down a beach, and they're like, "Oh, I'm thinking through my next book," and I was like, "Oh, just sit down in a chair and get to work. What are you doing?"
And that is the sound clip from this. This needs to go on a rail. Just sit down in a chair and get to work. What are you doing? This will be a reel, not the fact that my husband is now threatening to put me saying I was wrong on a loop. So
you've now said it twice. Good God, Vicky, you've said it twice.
No,
your career in politics is over.
It's gone. I'm sorry. I tend to be too honest for my own. So I think we've covered what we have time to cover. I don't make sure we covered everything we should. There's so much more to cover, Queeve.
Sorry.
You have an open invitation anytime. And I really enjoyed this. And thanks for the chuckles and the books. And we'll talk to you soon. Okay?
Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, definitely. Bye-bye. Okay. And for the rest of you, thanks for listening. It's been fun. And I just want to remind you that may your coffee be hot and your stories sweet. And thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.
You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3.